to give more of these kind of issue-based speeches across the country as his team tries to keep him on message. Obviously, as again we have reported, Kamala Harris.
What are you hearing about former President Trump's news conference that's set for the next hour?
Well, Boris, I was told that this was going to focus heavily on the economy. Obviously, he's going to open it up for questions, but that he wants to reiterate that messaging on the economy. Obviously, we saw yesterday he gave a speech in North Carolina where the focus was supposed to be the economy. And for Donald Trump, it was a rather focused speech, a smaller venue, a crowd that was sitting down. And we're told he's going to give more of these kind of issue-based speeches across the country as his team tries to keep him on message. Obviously, as again, we have reported, Kamala Harris has really shaken up this race. Her boost in enthusiasm, her boost in polling. And amid all of that, we've seen Donald Trump at times really seeming to not be able to contain himself, not be able to stay on those important issues that his campaign thinks will help him win in November. So as for this news conference, we will see how it goes. We will see if he stays on message. But the big goal coming out of that was to keep yesterday and today focused on the economy.
And Kristen, we are also learning an old face is coming back to the Trump campaign. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, a few old faces actually, but perhaps the most notable is Corey Lewandowski. He was the first campaign ever for Donald Trump. He joined Trump's campaign in June of 2015. He ultimately was ousted and replaced by Paul Manafort about a year later. He is going to be back on the campaign. And again, all of this coming at a time in which allies have expressed concerns about the direction that this campaign is going in and the direction the candidate is heading in. And Lewandowski is a staunch supporter, a staunch ally of Donald Trump's. And we did get a statement from Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles. They are the heads of the Trump campaign. And we are told by sources they're not going anywhere. These are just additions. But in the statement, they say, as we head into the home stretch of this election, we are continuing to add to our impressive campaign team. Corey Lewandowski, Taylor Budowich, who was the head of MAGA Inc., the super PAC aligned with Donald Trump, Alex Pfeiffer, spokesperson for MAGA Inc., Alex Bruzewitz, and Tim Murtaugh are all veterans of prior Trump campaigns, and their unmatched experience will help Donald Trump prosecute the case against Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the most radical ticket in American history. Again, this is very clearly, these additions are coming at a time in which we've seen the polling, we've seen the energy shift on the Democratic side, and we've seen the concerns from Republicans around Donald Trump that he needs to be more on message heading into this critical period. So very interesting to see this kind of changes at this time.
Yeah, notable to say the least. Kristen Holmes, Eva McKen, thank you both so much. Let's discuss all the aspects of the campaign right now with former Trump White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. Anthony, great to see you as always. Thanks for being with us. First, I want to ask you about the economic speech that Trump gave last night in Asheville. Kristen pointed out that the campaign is going to be focused on these smaller events, not rallies, kind of centered around a single issue. Why do you think that is, and what grade would you give the former president's performance yesterday?
Well, I mean, listen, it's the same grade. I give him a grade of a T, which is he's Donald Trump. That's how he's going to talk to people. He's demeaning and degrading, and he's off topic. So he's going to try to repair that today with the press conference. And I want to give a shout out to Corey Lewandowski. He is a friend of mine, even though he's on the wrong team. I like Corey, and I don't wish him well with this thing, but I wish him well in general in life because I want Donald Trump to lose. But I would say this to you: the smaller events are because he's worried about crowd sizes. He does not want his crowd sizes to be overwhelmed by Vice President Harris, and it looks that way. If you look at her crowd sizes recently, she's getting way more people. He knows that, and so that's why he's making this adaptation. So we can't rule Mr. Trump out of this race. He's a very aggressive, very formidable competitor, and he's recalibrating right now how he's going to approach the race from here to November. And I'll just point out to viewers and listeners, he did the same thing in August of 2016. We had a swap out in August of 2016, and Kellyanne Conway and Steve Bannon joined, and the race, got a lot tighter and a lot more complex after they joined. So he's doing something very similar right now.
He made a similar move in 2020. Do you believe the campaign when they say that their current heads, Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, aren't going anywhere? Do you think that might soon change too?
As Democrats rally around Kamala Harris as president?
I think there's a lot of pressure. There's been a lot of news reports that Chris was in particular trouble. The inside scuttlebutt is it's a little rough on the staff, and Donald Trump doesn't like the direction things are going in. And of course, I don't know if you remember George Steinbrenner, but Donald Trump sees himself as a modern day George Steinbrenner. So when things are not going well, it's never his fault. He's got to find scapegoats. So I think the pressure, though, now that this has been reported in the press that he was going to fire Chris, has probably stayed that execution for a while. But there's disarray in the campaign. Corey's very close to President Trump, and I think he's been relying on some good advice from Corey. And so, listen, a three-headed monster, it didn't work. You can ask Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar. It didn't work in Rome. It's not going to work here. They'll be fighting with each other coming into Labor Day.
So what do you think it means then for the campaign that they're relying on this boost and that they're potentially jeopardizing the dynamic with bringing someone like Corey Lewandowski in?
Well, Trump wants a shakeup. He doesn't like where things are. He's not on firm footing with his messaging. The stuff that he used against Hillary Clinton is not sticking with Vice President Harris. And so he wants to shake things up. And we'll have to see today at 4:30 if he stay on message. He's being told by his aides, if you stick to the issues, the border, the economy, people feeling better, meaning having more money in their pocketbook, inflation, he'll tighten up these polls. If he doesn't want to do that, and he wants to call the vice president mean and nasty, and he wants to use derogatory insults about her intelligence, I think he'll lose the race. And so I think his aides are telling him that. And so I think he'll recalibrate because this guy wants to win, and he's a formidable politician. And this is one of many adaptations that he's made during the course of his political career. And we'll see if he's less derogatory at 4:30.
Yeah, we'll see. It is interesting, though, because even that sort of sentiment, when you hear reporting about sources inside the Trump camp, that he wants a shakeup, that he doesn't feel like he's on firm footing, his favorability numbers in a campaign have never been higher. I believe he's close to 45, 44%, 44% right now. You look at 2020 and 2016. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think he's been fairly disciplined up until the Harris shakeup of the Democratic presidential nomination. So he's been fairly disciplined. But I think those numbers are his ceiling. I think he has, like, as everybody says, he has this high floor but a low ceiling. When you look at data, he could get to 47.5%. That's why the Republicans want people like Jill Stein and RFK Jr. in the race so they can chip away at Vice President Harris. But, that's a good number for him. That's about as good as it's going to get, frankly. And that's the fact that he's off of Twitter. If those meanderings on Truth Social, the insanity that he writes on Truth Social was actually on Twitter, and for those 80 million plus people that follow him on X, or now called X, I think it'd be a disaster for him, and those numbers drop. So he's been a beneficiary of being on Truth Social because he's talking to a hard right MAGA echo chamber over there. And people are not seeing the full insanity of the stuff that he's writing.
Conversely, I'm wondering what you think Vice President Harris needs to do as she lays out her vision of the economy in this speech in North Carolina tomorrow. What do you think would be an effective message from her?
I think an effective message is that the Joe Biden policies are working. Same thing that President Biden said yesterday, stay the course. We're heading for a soft landing. Rate cuts are coming. Inflation is coming down. Manufacturing is up. Onshoring of manufacturing is there. The infrastructure bill is lowering the cost of the delivery of goods and services. There's some rumors that she's talking about price controls. I hope she doesn't go in that direction, because that'll be very bad for the stock market. It'll be very bad for the capital markets in general in the United States. I think she should also emphasize that she wants an independent Fed. Donald Trump is calling for a dependent Fed on Donald Trump. So I guess he wants to be Erdogan of Turkey, and he wants to turn our Federal Reserve into the Turkish central bank, which would be an unmitigated disaster for the United States. So she should compare and contrast her messaging to his, but I really hope she stays away from price controls because that would be very bad for the economy and it would be very bad for her campaign. Last point, though, and I think this is a good one. I recommend that she does not take any interviews between now and her nomination. There's no need for her to do that. I know the media wants her to do that, but she's running a campaign for the American voters. I think her number one goal should be on missile lock to get that nomination before she steps out.
That's an interesting point. Anthony Scaramucci. By the way, I do remember George Steinbrenner. He was great on Seinfeld. Anthony, thank you so much.
Better at Seinfeld than he was as a Yankee boss. But yeah.
That's what I'm implying. Thanks so much, Anthony. Appreciate it.
2024 lead, Donald Trump reacting this morning on, where else? Fox, to the news of Vice President Harris picking Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her brand new running mate.
He's a very liberal man, and he's a shocking pick, and I'm thrilled. I could not be more thrilled. Nobody knew how radical left she was, but he's a smarter version of her. If you want to know the truth, he's probably about the same as Bernie Sanders. This is a ticket that would want this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner.
Okay. They're very progressive. They're not communists. But my panel joins me now to discuss. Elena, you've been following the Trump campaign closely. This is baked in. You thought, is any surprises here as to his reaction?
I mean, of course, they were always going to try to frame, regardless of who Harris picked, as someone who was super progressive, who was super left. But I can tell you part of that we didn't hear from this morning, or that wasn't just played now, was him saying that, he was really shocked that she didn't pick Shapiro. This is something that we've heard repeatedly. I've heard at least repeatedly in my conversations with Trump's advisors, which is they were very worried about Shapiro, obviously.
Because of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, he's very popular in Pennsylvania. I think the Trump team recognizes it is vital for them to win it. It is no guarantee. They're not, crazy confident that they're going to win it. And I think both campaigns, you hear this from Harris's team as well. They all see see Pennsylvania as being imperative to winning overall in November. But look, as for the way that they are trying to define Walz, there's a couple of reasons. One is that they've struggled for the last couple of weeks, ever since Biden ended his campaign and Harris became very quickly the presumptive Democratic nominee. They've been struggling how to define her. And when I talked to Trump's team about this in the last 24 hours, they said they kind of see Walz joining the ticket as a chance to try to define them together. And that's why they're jumping on this. Now, I do think that their argument that he's very progressive, that he's pushing the entire ticket to the left, will be hard to argue in some cases. I think if you look at what he did as governor, where he enshrined abortion rights into law, he protected rights for gender-affirming care, he passed universal gun background checks. Those are things that they're really going to be focusing on, I'm told, specifically the last 4 years. But as a congressman, he was actually a pretty moderate Democrat. He voted with Republicans on a number of things. He pushed to strengthen the border. He pushed to lower the national deficit. He was actually backed then by the NRA. And so I think they're still figuring out exactly which attacks will work best. But again, their biggest problem right now is which attacks work best on Harris. And that's why you heard Vance today really focus in both of his stops in Michigan and Wisconsin on going after Harris far more than he did go after her running mate.
Let me show you. CNN put together a list of the policies Walz has taken as governor, as Elena just mentioned. Passing a child state tax credit in Minnesota, making college tuition free for Minnesota families who make less than $80,000 a year, free breakfast, free lunch in public schools, signing an executive action that offers protections for people seeking trans health care in Minnesota. What do you make of the basic criticism from Donald Trump that Walz is basically as liberal, if not more liberal, than Bernie Sanders?
I think that it does not have any basis in fact. When we look at where Americans are, we know that college affordability is non-existent. We know that it's the fastest growing expenditure, second only to childcare. Americans want to be able to send their kids to school without having overwhelming debt that they're paying off for generations. We also know that what he's been able to do to reduce childcare expenses, to provide for affordable housing, to provide protections for those who have been overburdened by the criminal justice system, particularly Black men who have been the targets of it consistently over the years. Those are things that the overwhelming majority of Americans are supportive of. So I think that it's a very hard thing to try to pigeonhole him in. And to what you said a moment ago, when he was actually in Congress, we saw Walz work across both sides of the aisle. We saw him be able to formulate relationships. We saw him be able to be that person who brought bipartisanship. And I don't think that that's going to be something that would be dissolved should he become vice president. I think that Americans are smarter than that the things that the right is trying to push him on are things that we've seen not only work in his state, but are honestly things that many Americans have been asking for at the national level, things that unfortunately have been blocked by Republicans.
So, but Jake, he voted with Republicans 14% of the time. We're not talking 40%, 35%. And I know there's some talk about him having some past membership with the NRA. I'm a big gun guy. No one in the gun community gives a care about the NRA. It was one thing if he would have been with Gun Owners of America or Firearms Policy Institute. The NRA is irrelevant for most real serious gun enthusiasts. As it pertains to him being a liberal, let's look at the policies. Amisha talked about him doing some things for African-American men. I'll see that point. I was looking at a study from the University of Minnesota that talked about how his taxes at the local level and state level disproportionately impacts poor people, specifically people of color. I looked at migration patterns of people out of state. You can see if people are coming or going. There are more people leaving his state than coming to his state as a result of how expensive it is to live. So yes, his policies would not work for the average American person.
Path to the White House runs right through this state. And with your help, we will win in November. We are going to win.
The new Democratic ticket on the road tonight as Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz barnstorm battleground states 90 days before the November election.
I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket to help make Kamala Harris the next president of the United States.
One day after making a Philadelphia debut, Harris and Walz visiting Wisconsin and heading to Michigan as a bitter battle with the Republican rivals takes shape.
What Kamala Harris is telling all of us by selecting Tim Walz is that she bends the knee to the far left of the Democrat Party.
Senator J.D. Vance taking the lead in the furious scramble to define Walz, attacking his record as governor and his service in the Army National Guard.
He has not spent a day in a combat zone. What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not.
Vance accused his rival of ducking his service to Iraq when Walz left the National Guard and ran for Congress in 2005. But Walz actually retired 2 months before his unit received alert orders for deployment.
For 24 years, I proudly wore the uniform of this nation.
The 2024 race is now fully joined, with Harris and Walz crisscrossing the country together this week, an itinerary Vance is closely shadowing. Tropical Storm Debbie interrupting plans for the candidates to visit North Carolina and Georgia. Their paths, or planes at least, crossed today on a tarmac in Wisconsin.
I just wanted to check out my future plane, but I also wanted to go say hello to the Vice President.
Former President Donald Trump spent the day away from the campaign trail, calling into a Fox News program to try and diminish Harris and Walz.
Nobody knew how radical left she was, but he's a smarter version of her.
A full look at the Minnesota governor complicates the liberal brush Trump and Vance are seeking to paint him with. A social studies teacher and football coach, elected to a Republican-leaning congressional district, and now in his second term as governor, where he's defending his progressive agenda.
There's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
The spotlight on vice presidential hopefuls will soon give way to the top of the ticket and back to a debate over debates. Trump signaled a new willingness to meet Harris on a network other than Fox.
I don't know how she debates. I heard she's sort of a nasty person, but not a good good debater. But we'll see, because we'll be debating her, I guess, in the pretty near future.
And Harris and Walz are making their way to a rally right here in Michigan. You can see hundreds, if not thousands, of people will be gathering to see this new Democratic ticket. Jake, what that means is in a span of less than 24 hours, Harris and Walz have visited each of the 3 states in the critical blue wall. The question, of course, is can they expand this battleground map? As we talk to voters here, there's no doubt they are excited about this Democratic ticket. You can see the excitement behind me here. But that debate that the former president mentioned, that, of course, could change the equation. I'm told aides may be announcing more about that. Look potentially for that to happen in September. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny in Detroit, Michigan, thank you so much. And joining me now, the Democratic governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, who is on the Harris-Walz Campaign Advisory Board. Governor, thanks so much for joining us. So I know Democrats are very, very excited about the pick that Vice President Harris made in terms of Governor Walz. Conservatives point to some of his more progressive policies as Minnesota governor as potentially alienating of more moderate centrist voters. There's a statute that basically allows abortions at any stage of pregnancy, or at least doesn't include any prohibitions on abortion at any stage of pregnancy. Conservatives also point to protections for transgender youth health care, including gender reassignment surgeries, puberty blockers, hormone therapy. Do you have any concerns that Walz is or will be able to be painted as too progressive to win over undecided middle-of-the-road voters?
I think Governor Walz is and will continue to be an inspired choice, and someone who really has devoted his life to public service. And he is a true patriot of this country, having joined the military when he was 17 years old, having been a football coach and been a teacher, and then been a leader both in Congress and also as a governor. And I think he's been able to show with his policies that we don't have to choose between having a growing economy and also making sure that everyone is seen in our society. That while he was governor, he both did things like increasing a child tax credit and also making sure that we can have an inclusive business environment for people to be able to grow in. That you can say, yes, we can be the home of United Health Group and GM and Target, and also be the home for LGBTQ plus youth, and be the home for individuals who are returning from incarceration. And so I think he's been able to have a really balanced, common sense conversation about the future of Minnesota that I think is going to be important for people to understand how he thinks about his governing philosophy for a nation going forward.
Look, we share a lot of things. That's one of them. We're neighbors and we're not weird, that's for sure. But I got to tell you, something else we share is a care for the incredible natural resources. We in the upper Midwest, in our states, we care for 20% of the world's fresh water in those Great Lakes. The Great Lakes have no better friend than your Senator Stabenow. I got some members of Congress I had the privilege of serving with, and some that are new to that place. Let's be clear. We got to put gavels in the hands of these Democratic representatives so that we can get some work done. My friend Dan Kildee, Debbie Dingell, Haley Stevens, Alyssa Slotkin, Hillary Scholten, Representative Thander, I believe just won a primary here, Wayne County Executive Warren Evans, and the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party, LaVora Barnes. Thank you. And I want to just take a moment. It's been a pretty interesting 24 hours for me, I'll have to be honest. And I don't know how I could explain to you walking into that arena in Philly, or that field out in Wisconsin, or right here to what I have been told is the largest rally of the campaign. And look, this is a place full of working folks, students, folks who care. And I think about this. You came out here early, found a place to park, stood in the sun, sat here and wait, and you did it. You did it for one simple and eloquent and beautiful reason. You love this country. You love this country. I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket and to help make Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. Every day of her life, Vice President Harris fights for the American people. She's taken on predators, fraudsters, and transnational gangs. You heard it. She stood up to powerful corporate interests, and she has never hesitated to reach across the aisle, try and find some common solutions. And she has done it. And this is what we know. All the things that make me mad about those other guys and all the things they do wrong, the one thing that I will not forgive them for is they try to steal the joy from this country. They try and steal the joy. But you know what? You know what? Our next president brings the joy. She emanates the joy.
Governor Tim Walz there, of course, the newly minted vice presidential nominee on the ticket there for the Democrats.
What do you think about people sort of the two campaigns descending on Eau Claire today?
I think it's very exciting.
In Eau Claire, Wisconsin. What do you want to hear from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
Oh, just the truth. Peaceful, joyfulness, happiness, non-fighting, no more divisiveness. Just positive energy.
Two different campaign events. Are you hopeful that the Trump-Vance team can win Wisconsin?
Yes, and I think he's growing every day in Wisconsin.
USA! USA! And two very different opinions from voters. Outside the rally for Vice President Kamala Harris and her newly minted running mate Tim Walz, voters could hardly contain their excitement.
When Kamala became the presidential candidate, my whole being changed. I've been really upset and worried and fear.
Now you feel how?
Oh, hopeful.
What do you love about Governor Walz?
That he's down to earth and it's my own damn business, and he called the other people weird. I like that.
What did you think when you heard that Harris chose Governor Tim Walz as her running mate?
I thought it was a good move. You know, I think he's well known around here, and I think he's got the right attitude, you know, and I just hope everything keeps on a positive trajectory and we can talk about what really matters for the people in this country here.
I like his truthfulness, and the things he's done for the state of Minnesota are amazing.
But just about 5 miles down the road at J.D. Vance's event, these voters had nothing nice to say about Harris or Walz.
We can't go 4 more years, much less 4 months, as we are now. So we're hoping for a big change.
Like Trump said, if she gets in, America is going to be a bloodbath. It's just, we need to get Trump in and bring America back great again.
Some zeroed in on Walz's handling of the riots in Minnesota following the death of George Floyd.
He let Minneapolis burn down, and he didn't call in the National Guard. And then
He did eventually call in the National Guard.
5 days. Okay, 5 days later. Okay. Little too late. And then to say that it was peaceful, and there was nothing peaceful about what happened there.
Back across town, Harris-Walz supporters pushed back on Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance.
Oh, I read his book. I thought he was a different person when I read that book. But no, he's shown his true colors.
And they were even less complimentary of the man at the top of the Republican ticket. How do you feel when you hear Donald Trump say things about Kamala Harris like she just recently turned black?
Well, it just shows what a horrible person he is, and he's racist.
It's just meant to kind of incite and divide, and I'm tired of that, and I think a lot of people are, as evidenced by the people here today.
Oh my God, in my soul. Just the joy she brings, and him, it's just positive. I mean, we've had such negativity for how many years? Since 2016? Since the escalator incident? I'm just done with it.